Have we got W. James Antle III? Okay. James Antle is the Washington Examiner's politics editor and was previously the managing editor of the Daily Caller. He is also associate editor of the American Spectator and senior writer for the American Conservative. You can find his book, Devouring Freedom: Can Big Government Ever Be Stopped? It is now on Amazon. Do I call you James or W?
Jim, you can call me anything but late for dinner, I guess.
All right, fair enough. So, we're talking about this immigration thing, and obviously a lot of Republicans were in a panic looking at the midterms. Where do we stand now on the midterms? You wrote a piece for the Examiner saying things do not look like they used to.
Yeah, what happened is in the beginning of the year, things looked really bad for Republicans. But as the year has gone on, until pretty recently, things started looking up for Republicans. So you had a situation where we started the year with Democrats up in the generic ballot by double digits, with President Trump's approval rating sometimes hovering around the upper 30s. Democrats favored in a number of competitive races. You had a lot of Republican incumbents in the House heading for the exits, retiring. And you now had that redistricting issue in Pennsylvania, which should allow Democrats to pick up some seats. So things weren't looking very good, but gradually the Republicans' numbers improved. They're starting to dip a little bit again, but still you're looking at a situation where it's not entirely clear that the House is lost, so it will be tough to keep it. And the Republicans' prospects in the Senate actually look pretty good.
So typically, historically, right, the party in power loses a lot of seats. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say. In 18 of the last 20 midterms, the president's party has lost seats.
Okay. So when you have these generic ballots, I mean, I assume that especially in congressional races, aren't the issues kind of local? I mean, are people fighting over really looking at the big picture, or are they looking at the local races? Which do you think it is?
Well, that's really the question of when you get what people are talking about, a blue wave. So if you have a wave election, what typically happens is they get nationalized and national issues tend to dominate. But in a more typical election, local issues are a bit more important. So you have a situation, though, where both the Democrats and President Trump are trying to nationalize these elections. And so the Democrats want to nationalize it as a rejection of Trump, a rejection of the Republican congressional leadership. Trump is trying to nationalize it from the perspective of the Democrats being weak on the borders, weak on immigration, weak on national security, and obstructing the things that he's trying to accomplish for the economy and other areas of public policy.
How important is, I mean, it's kind of considered wisdom, it's typical common wisdom that the economy is all, basically. Everybody is voting their pocketbook. Do you think that's true?
I think it's less true than it used to be, but obviously the economy is important, and President Trump's job approval rating has climbed as we've had more and more sustained economic growth and as the unemployment rate has gone lower. But by historical standards, with the economy doing as well as it is doing right now, President Trump should be above 50% in job approval rating, and it's been quite a while since he's had such numbers in public opinion polls. So it's the economy stupid isn't totally wrong, but voters do seem to look at more than just how they're faring at the pocketbook when they make their voting decisions.
This whole thing of the resistance, that we are in the resistance, which always struck me as nonsense. I mean, it is, after all, we are still America. We are still voting for people. We don't really need a resistance as you do when you've been taken over. Is that hurting the Democrats? Is there any sign that that's an effective strategy?
Well, the concern, I think, for the Democrats is, one, that the resistance mentality might make them nominate some candidates in their primaries who aren't the strongest general election candidates, so they might end up not winning some seats that would otherwise be winnable for them. And the second concern is, even in districts where the resistance plays to their advantage, which is some of these college-educated suburban districts where it seems to be centered and where they do have some opportunities, especially in districts that Hillary Clinton won that have Republican incumbents representing them in the House. The worry, I think, for Democrats there is that the enthusiasm cuts against them by having primaries that are so crowded that, again, you end up in a situation where maybe your better candidate for November doesn't make it out of the primary, doesn't win the nomination, and then you sacrifice some winnable seats that way.
On this immigration thing, I've been it's been kind of stunning to watch this week, because the typical playbook is the press gins up hysteria. You get the children crying, whatever it is they've got that's going for them emotionally, and the GOP runs for the hills. Trump has been incredibly aggressive. I mean, that speech he made in Minnesota, it really had my eyebrows flaming. Do you think, I know that people don't want to see children cry, but I also think that this idea of borders, strong borders, is pretty popular. Is there any way of telling where this is going to break, or you have any sense of where it's going to break?
Well, the polling on it doesn't look very good for President Trump and the Republicans, and that's why congressional Republicans are panicking a little bit. But the question really is, and I don't think we know the answer to this yet, but the question is, what intensity do voters feel about this? Is this actually an issue that's going to move people's votes? Because if you look at DACA, the polling numbers on that looked very bad for President Trump and the Republicans. A lot of surveys found it an 80-20 issue going against Trump. But in point of fact, it didn't really seem to spark much of a political backlash, didn't seem to be moving very many votes, and it was actually the Senate Democrats who caved in the DACA-related government shutdown, not once but twice. So, sometimes you can look at these polls and people will give the answers that they're supposed to give, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what the intensity level is and whether it's salient for people making their voting choices. And maybe in this case it is, because they're going to see the images of the children crying, but I still think that's an open question.
Really interesting. I'm reading that book, The Great Revolt, about who the Trump coalition is. Is there any sign that coalition is fading or getting stronger? Do you have any idea where that's going?
Well, it's going to be a real big question for Republicans in the midterms. Are they going to have a problem similar to what the Democrats had under Barack Obama, where there was a coalition that was big enough to win elections, but it was only really turning out when Obama himself was on the ballot, and the Democrats couldn't replicate it without him? Can Republicans replicate what Trump did without him at the top of the ticket? That's why you're seeing Trump go out to all of these swing states, and that's really where these battleground states, where a lot of the Senate races in particular are going to be fought, is where he tends to be having all of these rallies now. Trump is trying to transfer his appeal to down-ballot Republicans. Will it work? There are parts of the general Republican message that are a little distinct from Trump that may not be as appealing in the industrial Midwest, which was really how Trump pierced the blue wall to win the presidency.
Interesting. I'm not going to put you on the spot. I am going to put you on the spot, but I will not hold you to any predictions. I'm very much I really believe the future is not ours to know. If you had to bet, $20, do you think the Republicans will hold the House?
I do not.
You don't? Wow.
I don't. I think they'll pick up seats in the Senate, but I don't think they'll hold the House.
Wow. Okay. W. James Antle III from the Washington Examiner. Thank you very much. It was really informative. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We were talking before about free speech, and I have an actual good news story. This is really interesting, because when you get away from all the crisis stuff, which is basically generated by the press, because the country's not in crisis. The only crisis is the press didn't get what they wanted. The left didn't get what they want. That's the crisis. But the left is in the minority. I mean, if you look at things like Starbucks, the NFL, these are incredible companies that are killing themselves by buying into what the press told them, that we will keep quiet, that we won't fight back, that we will let them do their social justice garbage, and we're not going to say anything. When you watch that, the people are very different than the noise, all this noise that is going on around us.